where the heart dwells. In a quaint little village nestled between rolling hills and lush green fields, there was a house unlike any other. It stood on the edge of the forest, where the trees whispered secrets to the wind, and the sunlight danced through the leaves like a ballet of golden beams. This house was known as the Hearthstone Cottage, a place where love and warmth always seemed to dwell. For as long as anyone could remember, the cottage belonged to the Holloway family. Generations of Holloways had lived there, tending to the land, the animals, and most importantly, to each other. The house itself was modest, with ivy-covered walls and a roof that sagged slightly in the middle. But what it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in charm and character. The windows, framed in oak, glowed with the light of countless evenings spent around the fireplace, where stories were told and laughter filled the air. In the heart of this home lived Rose Holloway, a young woman of 28, who had recently returned to the village after living in the bustling city for nearly a decade. She had left the village to pursue her dreams of becoming an artist, but the fast-paced life of the city had drained her of the inspiration she once had. Now, with her father's passing, she returned to the cottage where she had grown up, hoping to find solace in the familiar embrace of the place she had always called home. Rose had always been close to her father, Jonathan Holloway, a gentleman with a heart as big as the forest itself. He had taught her everything she knew about the land, about tending to the garden, and about how to find peace in the simple things. But more than anything, he had shown her what it meant to love deeply and fully, even in the face of loss. When Rose arrived at the cottage, it was late autumn, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of red, orange, and gold. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine and earth filled her lungs as she stepped out of the car. She stood for a moment, gazing at the cottage, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief wash over her. This was her refuge, the place where her heart had always felt most at home. Inside, everything was as she remembered. The worn wooden floors creaked under her feet as she walked through the rooms, each one filled with memories of her childhood. The kitchen, where her mother had baked bread on Sunday mornings, still smelled faintly of rosemary and thyme. The living room, with its stone hearth and overstuffed armchairs, felt as though her father could walk in at any moment, ready to tell her one of his famous stories. But it was the studio that drew her in the most. This was the room where her father had spent countless hours painting, sketching, and carving wooden figures. He had been an artist just like Rose, though his art had always been more connected to the natural world. His paintings were of landscapes and animals, capturing the beauty of the land around them in a way that made people feel as though they were part of the scene. Rose ran her fingers over the edge of her father's workbench, her heart aching with the loss of him. But there was something else there too, a feeling of connection, as though he were still with her, guiding her hands as she picked up a piece of charcoal and began to sketch. Days turned into weeks as Rose settled back into life at the cottage. She spent her mornings walking through the forest, finding inspiration in the way the light filtered through the trees and the sound of the river as it rushed over rocks. In the afternoons, she would sit in the studio, painting and drawing, her father's presence a constant companion. But it wasn't just the house and the land that filled her heart with warmth. It was the people of the village as well. They had always been like family to her, and they welcomed her back with open arms. Old friends stopped by to visit, bringing with them stories of the past and news of the present. Among them was Thomas Whitaker, a childhood friend who had grown into a kind and thoughtful man. Thomas had taken over his family's farm, just a short walk from the cottage, and he and Rose quickly rekindled their friendship. They spent hours together, talking about everything from the changing seasons to their shared memories of growing up in the village. It wasn't long before Rose began to realize that her feelings for Thomas were deeper than just friendship. There was a quiet strength in him, a steadiness that made her feel safe and understood in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. As winter set in, the cottage became a haven of warmth and light. Rose and Thomas would sit by the fire, sharing stories and cups of tea, while the snow fell softly outside. And slowly, Rose began to heal. The pain of losing her father was still there, but it no longer consumed her. She had found peace in the place where her heart had always dwelled, in the love of her family, her art, and the growing bond with Thomas. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Thomas took her hand in his and looked at her with a tenderness that made her heart swell. "Rose," he said softly, "this house, this land, it's where your heart belongs. And I'd be honored if you'd let me be a part of it." Tears welled in Rose's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. She had come back to the cottage seeking solace, and instead, she had found love, love that had been there all along, waiting for her to return. From that day on, the Hearthstone Cottage became not just a home, but a place where love and life intertwined in every corner. And Rose knew, deep in her heart, that she had found where she truly belonged. Where the heart dwells, love will always follow.